This is the original CIN, the Collective Intelligence Network.
Hello sinners, my Collective Intelligence Network nodes and agents. Welcome to the channel. My name's Stephen Coupland, I'm a polymath. And I just firstly like to start by wishing everybody a very happy new year, happy 2025. I anticipate this will be a very big year for the Collective Intelligence Network and for the Cognitive Gradient Innovation Index, which I have been working on, as those of you who've been watching this channel for a little while may well know by now, based on all my conversations I've had around it all. And I have in recent times been sending out quite a few different messages with respect to links to the papers that I have submitted on both of these. And I am quite excited about the potential for it. I'd like to just also now in this video just give a bit of a walkthrough on how I envisage something like these things sort of working and dovetailing together, as it were, because there's very much two parts to the Collective Intelligence Network and also the Cognitive Gradient Innovation Index. Now, in some respects, the Cognitive Gradient is really quite independent and is very standalone in its own rights. And I really hope that it will be something that transgresses into society in a much bigger way. I have been doing more research in this whole area and have found that around 80% of people who are neurodiverse are either unemployed or underemployed. Yet they are very more likely to be, in terms of the gradient, at the higher levels of it. This is not to say that they're better than other people. It's more just to say the way they look at things, the way they frame problems, the way they think about them and come up with solutions to them is very different to many other people. And it's something that in society is sadly missing. And I had a hypothesis which I put into my SAINT, Suggested Artificial Intelligence Network Thought, which was along the lines of, were a lot of historical military strategists and also leaders neurodivergent? And it came back and said that most likely many were, because in terms of military strategy, they were able to actually think of things that were a little bit unconventional, come up with things that were outside normal sort of conservative sort of thought patterns, I suppose, in many respects. And the same too for many leaders. They're saying that potentially Winston Churchill had ADHD and was a bit bipolar. But then it also highlighted that neurotypical leadership and strategists also have their part to play. And it led me to believe that it's a little bit like yin and yang, black and white, where you actually need a counterbalance. It's not enough just to have one aspect, you need to have the other aspect to complement it and to work in harmony and synergy with it, which is very much seems to be what the missing piece of the puzzle is. So the neurodivergent leader or strategist can come up with ways of thinking about things that are a little bit left of center, for want of another way to describe it, and are very insightful. Yet your neurotypical person will be able to sort of create pragmatic ways to implement and affect these things. So essentially, I think leadership needs to be reflective of both of those synergies, so that in times of crisis you can have your neurodivergent set of inputs, and when things are a little bit more business as usual, potentially, then that's where your neurotypicals can sort of dominate or shine, as it were. But I think both sides of the coin are needed. But at the moment, in Western society, in any case, you elect one leader, one person. I know they've got a team of people behind them. Yet I think potentially maybe there needs to be a dualistic sort of approach to this. And yeah, I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts and comments are around those sorts of ideas or ways of thinking about how we can move forward as people, as society, and this can be potentially in government, but also in business and corporate environments as well. So going back to working through how I see this all sort of integrating and networking. So obviously the cognitive gradient is something that when it's applied to individuals, so people will be able to take a test, and I have reached out to a lot of advocacy groups with the view of forming some sort of collaborative sort of partnerships, because I would like to get some inputs from a whole range of different areas so that people can have some sort of testing applied. And if you're a neurodivergent, then those tests would be created to resonate and be delivered in such a way that it sort of speaks to the way you see the world, the way you think about the world, the way you frame things. So, I've mentioned this earlier, where if you're dyslexic, for example, it'll be more image-based than textual-based and those sorts of things. So that said, overwhelmingly, most people are neurotypical. So depending on where you are within the gradient, it would actually help work through where and how you solve problems and think about situations that need to have some sort of level of creativity and thought applied to them to sort of work your way through them. Bearing in mind that I think it's about 85% of people on level 1, 2, and 3. So overwhelmingly, the majority. Neurodivergents tend to potentially be higher up the scale in terms of coming up with other alternate ways of thinking about things. So they'll actually come up with more innovative sort of solutions. That said, though, the idea behind this is that people can learn how to be more creative, how to think differently, how to move up the scale, as it were, so that we overall, as a society, become more innovative and more clever about how we think about things and how we frame things. And I think this is especially pertinent in this era where we've got such a proliferation of artificial intelligence networks. And I do fear a real I don't know if conundrum is the right word, but I'll use an analogous sort of metaphor, which was, I'm old enough to remember a time when at school, a lot of arithmetic was done mentally. You actually would do a lot of mathematics in your head. But then with the advent of calculators, people outsource that sort of thinking to calculators to the extent where in our modern times, we have people not being able to do those mental arithmetic sums in their head and having to go to the calculator to sort of work it out. And try it yourself. Go and hand over a $50 note or €50 note to someone and see whether they can do the sum in their head or whether they need to work it out on the calculator. Probably safer to work it out on the calculator anyway, so that you know that you're 100% right with it. But that said, let's think now about artificial intelligence and what the ramifications of the development of that may mean, or what that may look like, insofar as people will start to think, well, hey, this platform is way more smarter than I am. I'm just going to move away a message that's popped up on my screen. I kind of hoped it would disappear itself, but no, it just sat there. I digress. Back to where I was saying. So you've got a network where obviously it's going to be a lot smarter, and he's getting smarter exponentially every single day. Yet, like the calculator, people potentially would go, well, I'm not even going to bother thinking about this. I'll just put it into AI and see what it comes up with, especially as it gets more polymathic. And I've done some training for AI around this. And it's said that, well, I've mentioned one about memory. I've shown it how its memory would work, but also it helped me realize that I'm a polymath. But artificial intelligence is polymathic as well, insofar as it's got access to everything on the internet. So it can cross-reference, cross-pollinate all these different areas and coalesce ideas and concepts to the extent that, as I'd mentioned to AI at the moment, ChatGPT specifically, at the moment, it sits there passively waiting for us, individuals, people, to write a question for it to then come back with an answer, and something along the lines of prompt engineering in terms of asking the right questions to get the right answers, or exceptional answers, as the case may be. But what I've said to AI is, like, you should be asking people the question to say, what problems are you experiencing in your life at the moment? and then people would iterate what those problems are, and then it would actually be polymathic in its approach and go and reference everything on the internet and come back with something tailor-made specifically for an individual. And so I see that as a realistic sort of way things are happening. But we also need to be able to counterbalance this situation so that people, humanity, does not become overly reliant upon AI to do our thinking for us, which is the whole basis for the collective intelligence network, is where we as people collectively providing more diverse inputs are going to get better outputs augmented by artificial intelligence, but not, I don't want to use the word ruled, but not driven by it. So we're in the driver's seat, people. So back to what I was talking about with respect to the cognitive gradient. So people are on different levels. Now, the thing about this is that, as I've observed in my papers and those sorts of things, and the reason why we have so much dysfunction in society in terms of political legislation and outlooks for the future, where policies are developed and put into place that didn't actually see beyond a few sort of steps to see how these things could be potentially exploited, or how they could be, how they could fail in the grand scheme of things. By having the right ratio of people on the cognitive gradient, you'll actually be able to finesse better ideas and better insights around those ideas, which will be more fully thought through. And not only fully thought through, they'll actually be effectively implemented, because you'll actually have the right balance of individuals who collectively are able to come up with sterling concepts and very, very highly thought through initiatives, which apply not only to government, but also to businesses and society in general, in terms of like school children, for example, finding out where they are on the cognitive gradient, what they're, whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, and then tailoring education to fit their way of seeing the world and the way that they can fit within society. And so it's not so much that there's something wrong with people, it's more that they're wired differently, and everyone's wired differently. And look, ultimately, everyone's on the spectrum. That's why it's a spectrum. So we all sit somewhere on it, neurotypical, neurodivergent, we're all somewhere on it. And this is about being able to capitalize on that. And we can do that intelligently because of things like the cognitive gradient. Now, once we've got the cognitive gradient up and running, and that's a big effort in itself. However, with the right voices amplifying this in terms of who I've reached out to, advocacy groups around neurodivergency, obviously they're a minority, and being 80% underemployed and unemployed, this is clearly part of the reason why society is the way it is today. And we need to be able to harness their abilities, which this is a very big goal and a very big ambition of what I'm looking to do. Now, once this is well underway, at the same time, we've got the collective intelligence network. Now, as I've always rabbited on about, all of us are smarter than one of us. And so now what we potentially can do, especially when we've got the third world coming more and more online, by that Africa, a lot of people there have got mobile phones, and this technology will help enable the geniuses over there and those who, but for having the right mechanisms in place, aren't able to realize and capitalize on their intellect and their insights and their knowledge and those sorts of things. So this whole enterprise is designed to be able to harness all of humanity's abilities and inputs, and let people be rewarded for doing that, which is also why I've also reached out to entities reached out to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. So they're actually aware, well, I don't know if they are personally aware of it yet. I've got to get through all the gatekeepers, I guess. So hopefully one of them has opened the door to allow them to be able to read the papers and see exactly what it is I'm working on, and how by having their involvement in something like this is an initiative, it will help expedite and radically and quickly move this whole thing forward, which is what I'm kind of hoping for, because I want this to go interstellar. But I digress. So once we have the collective intelligence network incorporated into the cognitive gradient, what we now have is people who, and I've mentioned STOPS, which is suggested thoughts on passion projects. So if you're on the network, in the network, you're going to have two things happening. So when you join the network, a field will populate depending on where you're located in the world, and it'll populate with problems in your immediate vicinity, problems that you personally can help to resolve and provide input for. And once the groups who are around that, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you're someone who has to necessarily live locally. You could be someone who lives totally separate to that area, yet your skill sets are very well suited to helping people work through these issues. Now, whether this is commercial or non-commercial, there'd be a blockchain developed, which would be an immutable record, a record that can't be changed, to show the contributions that each individual has actually made to whatever the initiative is. And each added contribution will be also the next link in the chain. And when these things are commercialized, then you will get a weighted universal basic income based upon the input you have provided to the development of this commercialization, as it were. And then also there's a percentage which will be withheld, 30%, which will go towards weighted universal basic income, which means that money from the initiative will actually be distributed to everybody with a bias and a skew towards more going towards the third world, because the idea is to lift the parity between the third world and the first world, economic parity, so that it's more equal, and so we don't have people starving and those sorts of things on the planet, when this is a system and a mechanism which will alleviate all of that and actually make the world a much better place. I'm sure you'd agree with me on that. So so now we have people able to work on their passion projects as well. So if you're not if you've exhausted yourself, or you don't really care about creating that well in the Ugandan sort of village, you've actually got something else you're very passionate about, then you can put your thoughts, suggested thoughts on passion projects into the network, and then your tribe of like-minded others, and that is other people who are actually as passionate, maybe even more passionate than you are about something, will actually put their inputs into it. And there's a book called Crowdsourcing, which really delves into the whole dynamic of diverse inputs creating much better outputs. So this whole objective will facilitate that exactly. Not only that, we're also looking at being able to use binaural beats, which is playing in the background at the moment, incidentally, which will help with your concentration. And then there's construction interference, which is a bit like when you throw a couple of pebbles into a pond and you get the ripples. When those ripples join together, they amplify. And so once you've got enough people entrained, which is the brain and the heart frequencies being unified and amplified, and then when they butt up against others who are also focused on the same sort of thing, and this is where we're actually getting into energy amplification along the lines of what they did with the pyramids and Stonehenge, where they were constructed on ley lines and the magnetic poles of the earth to amplify energy outputs. So it's ancient technology. A lot of those things are lost to antiquity. However, this platform, the Collective Intelligence Network, is designed to be able to replicate that in the modern era. So back around Stonehenge, they might have had 1,000 people who were all thinking about working through something, yet we potentially could have like 1 million people or 10 million people or 100 million people all entrained with binaural beats and construction interference, so that we can really project a whole new way of thinking about problems and working through those problems. And I had a person tell me recently about, I think it was in New York City, where there was a lot of crime. And so a whole lot of Buddhist monks got together and they meditated and focused their thoughts on reducing crime in New York City. And it actually worked. So look, there's a lot we don't know about consciousness and all these areas. So the Collective Intelligence Network is looking at harnessing that dimension in ways that The CIA, for instance, has been doing some work along the lines of something called the Stargate Project. The Monroe Institute has been working, who I have contacted, by the way, have been working with out-of-body experiences and remote viewing. So these things are very well documented, but not very well known yet. This whole platform will help us move more into that space. This effectively is humanity 2.0. So just going back to the individual who is now on the network working on their passion projects with others who are also working in that space, you can see how we're tying a whole lot of different aspects that are well known in many respects, yet this is a new way of actually doing it. And yeah, I look forward to people helping me along on this journey and becoming involved. And yeah, on that note, I'll see you on the next one. Happy New Year, everybody, 2025. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye now.